allowing me to come and share my story. First, I want you to know I love my son. I love both of my sons dearly. Mental illness has destroyed my entire family, and I may be looking at bankruptcy due to the cost, which is very little compared to the others. I'm going to share with you details that no mom wants to share of their children, and the only reason I'm sharing this information is in hope that no other mother or brother will have to go through the torment that my family has. My son's first therapy visit was during grade school, and we were in Minnesota, and there was an ample source of care there, and we got in very quickly. By the time my son was in high school, we had relocated to Steamboat Springs, and in rural Colorado, there's virtually no access to mental health care. And so I felt very, very stranded. Years later, my son's diagnosis is marijuana-induced psychosis, yet most likely should be schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. What I've observed during the past several years is that mental illness does not receive equity of treatment in comparison with other illnesses, even such as cancer and strep throat. Unlike other illnesses, in Colorado, our medical industry has decided to eliminate mental illness from its list of illnesses they treat, and instead to criminalize mental illness. A person with a mental health diagnosis does not receive the equity to reach their full potential that the rest of us do. Drew's first inpatient stay was after his freshman year of college. He had been very anxious after coming home that summer, and one night he was having delusions of grandeur and suicidal thoughts. We took him to the hospital, and in spite of being very calm and being very medicated by the ER, Drew was cuffed and shackled to be transported to Mine Springs and Grand Junction. I was on the floor begging them not to treat my son in this manner, and they said I no longer had any say in my son's treatment, that he was now property of the state. When Drew arrived in Grand Junction, he was comatose and traumatized, and he still has no trust for police officers or any treatment providers. They also diagnosed him with bipolar disorder without doing a psych evaluation. I was told in Steamboat not to visit him in Mine Springs, that he wouldn't need anything there. I did visit him, and he did need clothing, and he needed things like books to read because they have so much downtime, and he needed the moral support of a visitor, a family. The care of Mine Springs was atrocious. Drew had an allergic reaction to a drug. They didn't treat him for it. He called me. I called his dad, an ER physician on the East Coast. His dad had to call Mine Springs to demand that they treat him for his allergic reaction. Mine Springs extended the hold on Drew, but we were able to get him transferred out to a hospital on the East Coast. There I was educated on what evaluations were actually needed before a diagnosis could be established. I attended crisis counseling during that episode and was told by my counselor that Drew would need mental health care for the rest of his life, and that he would never receive it in Colorado, and that I should move out of state. I already felt like I was a para-pension prisoner and could not leave the state of Colorado, and to this day I regret that decision. Throughout the next few years, Drew went homeless, traveled with the Rainbow People, came back to Colorado, and worked throughout this time. He dabbled in heroin. He had been a previous national competitor in snowboarding, and he went to a prestigious private college before that. He was self-medicating. His dad had him charged with domestic violence, and Drew was put on probation. He stabilized and worked there for a year before he returned to live with me in Glowing Springs. It was clear his mental health had greatly deteriorated. He easily became violent towards me. I could not gain assistance for that from domestic violence shelters because my son is not an intimate partner, so despite when I would show them physical injuries, I was turned away and told that I was not covered under their grant process, and I told them they need to include all family members under their grant process. Drew, at that point, could not receive treatment in Glenwood, again, rural Colorado. I transferred with my state physician to Grand Junction, thinking he would receive adequate care there. It was better, but far from adequate. He once admitted himself to Mine Springs. I showed the nurses bruises up and down my rib cage, my arms, and my legs. They were certain the doctor would extend the hold, but the doctor did not. The nurses also let the doctors know that I reported Drew hearing voices. He calls his voices his psychics. The doctor asked Drew about his voices. Drew, of course, denied them because he doesn't want to extend his stay. And the doctor said he's never fooled. Drew doesn't hear voices. He was so fooled at that point. When Drew becomes violent with me, he holds me hostage. He won't let me leave our apartment. He won't let me have access to my phone. He destroys furniture. He throws furniture at me. Drew becomes a monster. He's no longer my son because of his mental illness. His brain's fractured. He also had traumatic brain injuries from all the concussions and snowboarding and football games. So I relocated to Denver so that Drew could get better care. He immediately attempted suicide and was admitted to the Aurora Mental Health Center for a 72-hour hold. They refused to talk to either his father, or I to get more information, and was released without having even meds put on board. I was told that Colorado's now adopted a short stay policy, and that it's more effective in the treatment of individuals. So it's more effective that they leave without being on any meds at all. He did get assigned a therapist. So while he was seeing this therapist, whose specialty was in addiction issues, which was not his issue at this point, Drew almost completed suicide. I came home one day and he was unresponsive in the bathtub. The first responders came and gave him chest compressions, and once he was medically stabilized, he was sent to Johnstown, which I later learned is under investigation. I almost called 911 from Johnstown regarding a lack of care. Drew was once again released within 3 days. I tried to notify the psychiatrist that Drew was hearing voices. One of his voices tells him to beat the shit out of me. The doctor refused to talk to us and once again said, no, Drew's amazingly stable and he doesn't hear voices. I want to tell you, Drew presents really well, just like Ted Bundy, and I cannot tell you how much it hurts a mom to say that. They won't manage his anxiety because it is no longer favorable to prescribe benzos, and he needs to have his anxiety managed so that he can go and accept care for the rest of his issues. Drew's assaults on me continued to escalate. I had been told by many therapists at this point that Drew would continue on until he kills me. I searched for an intensive outpatient program, and I gave them all the details. There was an 8-month wait for an intake. I said, if someone has stroke or cancer, you don't tell them there's an 8-month wait, because these illnesses cannot wait 8 months for treatment, nor can they wait 2 months for treatment. I was told that if Drew was in the legal system, that this wait would be shortened. I did Drew places like Bayard, and they could see that he needed inpatient care, but they wouldn't assist me in calling. The police came to my house many times when I called them and tried to get Drew an inpatient stay, and Drew was denied his inpatient stays. I began asking the police what I should do. They told me to get a nanny cam. I got a nanny cam and I recorded his attacks on me. So now he was arrested. I had to look out for my safety, and if I get 60, Drew would then be arrested for elder abuse. So I felt this was the best decision. So he was arrested, but even though I told them that Drew was mentally unstable and not cognitively able to take care of himself, on a rearrest after he had broken probation, they released him at midnight. When I went to do my civil assist the next day, which is where you drop off stuff for their care because I had a protection order, he had never shown up at the hotel. And this was through the MHCG program because someone was on a ride-along during his arrest, and it was like divine intervention, as they call it. But when Drew was released at midnight, he asked if he could stay in jail till the next day, and they wouldn't let him, and it was a really cold night. So the police and I searched for him. So right before we were going to do a missing persons, we did find him. He had almost sold his watch that night to get heroin because he was so cold and he was so scared. He didn't understand the hotel had been paid for. And so once the police explained that, he did go to the hotel. In this program, Drew now has a job, and they were able to help Drew get an apartment on his own, but he is not thriving. He now has another voice. All the other psychics, even though they said, they want to beat the shit out of me, they didn't want Drew to kill me. And Drew says this new psychic doesn't like me. But once again, he's now in the legal system, but he's not getting any care. So I fought for him to not get a violent, which I got. They upped his charges to a felony. And I didn't want him to get the violent because that's my wheelhouse. I help people post-incarceration find jobs through CDLE, and then I work specifically now with DVR, and I know what that violent means. But the prosecutor assured me on probation he will get a thorough mental health examination. He has not gotten that examination. The probation officer says Drew presents so well. He's doing really well. And I send her the video so she can now see this other side of Drew. They're not monitoring whether or not he goes to his therapy appointments, and he is still, this started in September when he was in the court system. He still has not seen a doctor for medication. Supposedly that will happen in February. We will see. Again, no one is tracking that. So I'm not sure why our healthcare system doesn't understand the simple statement that, as I said, a mental illness can no longer wait for treatment than any other illness. It's not a lack of funding. When I go get my breast cancer screenings, I'm given a really fluffy pink robe, and there's food everywhere, and there's juice everywhere. If they have that money coming in, and they're choosing to distribute it in a breast cancer center, they should take that money and fund it towards mental health. So instead of closing down IOP treatment centers, they're opening more IOP treatment centers. We don't need pink fluffy robes when other people are not getting health care at all. People say that individuals with a mental illness are no more dangerous than the general population. And where that may be true for the majority, it is heartbreaking for me to say, my son is dangerous. Right now, his anger and his violence is directed towards me. I have no idea when or if that anger will be focused towards someone else. I have begged for treatment through the legal system and through the mental health care system, and we have been turned away. The system is broken not only for the people with the mental illness, but it is broken for society because this is not protecting anyone. Thank you.